Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 21st of June 2024. Let's go to shipping and we'll start with, in this geopolitics video, South Korea imposing new sanctions against Russian ships that supply oil to North Korea and export weapons from there. So this is all in the context of North Korea signing a military political agreement with Russia, a bilateral agreement that South Korea have reacted to and said, okay, we're going to start selling, or we're going to consider selling arms to Ukraine directly. We're going to change the way we operate. I don't know what the time frame on all of that is, but they're also looking at going hard on the shipping that enables North Korea to assist Russia and vice versa. This was stated by National Security Advisor to the President of South Korea. He condemned the, quote, comprehensive strategic agreement recently signed by both Putin and Kim Jong-un. South Korea are going to be an important player now, I think, or increasingly so. Now, the EU has agreed their first ever Russian gas sanctions hitting LNG, liquefied natural gas shipments. Gentle reminder that Russia imported more gas, combined pipeline and LNG to Europe in May, or exported to Europe in May this year, than the US. So the US is picking up the slack where Russia drops off with LNG shipments. The issue for Russia is they have all of this gas produced, but they don't quite know what to do with it. They can't, because they need to basically export that in pipelines, and since Nord Stream 1 and 2 are like no-go now, then they don't have the capacity to get rid of all the gas to other markets, because you can't just build pipelines. You have to. So at the moment they're using existing pipelines, trying to kind of resurrect one in the Eurasian area. But the other option then, because they have been previously burning gas because they can't export it, and they don't have the storage capabilities. They have been sanctioned, and many of the people providing tech for the Russian hydrocarbons industry have pulled out of Russia. So they're really suffering in expertise and components and maintenance. They would have to build LNG refinement facilities in order to increase their exports of LNG, to turning the gas into a liquid to then more easily put it on a ship, for example, as you can see in that picture, and ship it elsewhere. Now, the US has been ramping up their LNG exports to Europe to replace the gas imports that Europe used to have from Russia, so we'll see what happens there. Norwegian ships aid Russian seafood exports amid sanctions. NRK reports Norwegian vessels transferred 2,000 tons of fish from a Russian ship in Svalbard. This allows delivery to Dutch ports after a ban on Russian ships. Russian fish exports are up 12% in 2023. This is very similar to the transshipments of, the shadow fleets operating again in the hydrocarbon sector with oil, where they transfer Russian oil from one ship to another and then take that to a port and say, hey, we're not a Russian ship, whatever. And they can get around sanctions in that way. Well, it appears to be happening with fish with the Norwegians. That's obviously something that needs looking into. But in terms of exports along the grain corridor down the coast of the Black Sea, that western coast, all things are going fairly well at the moment. As Exit says, I really should get her back on the on the video on the channel. It says a third busy day in a row. The Ukrainian corridor is humming. Things are looking good at the moment for Ukrainian exports and shipping. Right, now moving on, the US will ban the sale of Kaspersky Lab antivirus software due to the alleged influence of the Russian government. This was announced by US Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. The US authorities are concerned that Kaspersky's products may steal confidential information from US computers or install malware. Then we have Japan imposing sanctions on 11 individuals and 42 companies from Russia, as well as 11 companies from India, Kazakhstan, China, UAE, and Uzbekistan. Japan are really stepping up sanctioning there. The EU Council confirms accession talks with Ukraine and Moldova to start on June the 25th. The EU Council on June the 21st approved the accession negotiations framework with Ukraine and Moldova. That's excellent. So it's all looking good. In fact, all 27 member states today voted for Ukraine to be allowed to start those accession negotiations. Brilliant. Really quite historic for Ukraine there. Now, Slovakia's defense ministry, I reported on this a little bit previously. If you remember, Slovakia exported, if you like, or in one of their packages gave before Robert Fico took over with his present government, when Slovakia were much more overt in their support of Ukraine. They shipped a bunch of MiG-29s with Poland across to Ukraine. I think they, chopped them up and got them across the border, and they were reassembled. Slovakia's defense ministry will initiate criminal proceedings against former Prime Minister Eduard Heger and former Defense Minister Jaroslav Nadia over the transfer of MiG-29s to Ukraine, the agency state secretary Igor Melicha has said. This shows you how divisive Ukraine is now in Slovakia. It's tremendously sad, this. Quote, after this decision to transfer the equipment to Ukraine, Slovakia's skies were left unprotected and citizens were put in danger, Melicha said. Just, really a real shame that Slovakia is going full on, doubling down on the pro-Russian stance there by the looks of it. Now, big news is that all NATO countries have now approved the candidacy of acting Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte for the post of the alliances of NATO's Secretary General. In addition to Rutte, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis was another contender for the post, but he announced yesterday that he was withdrawing his candidacy. Rutte will step down as Prime Minister of the Netherlands in a few weeks when a new government will be formed. Current NATO Secretary Stoltenberg will step down on October the 1st. And NATO, so then staying on NATO, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian authoritarian leader, has said NATO will conduct a military mission in Ukraine. Hungary will not participate in it. Now, this is where I'm going to get a bit ranty, okay, because I am genuinely fed up with this prize peanut. And I don't mean Viktor Orban, because that guy is a grade A plonker of just the highest order. But anyway, Orban has said Hungary will get off the train. But the driver could not be convinced, and now only Trump can stop the train. Right, if you have still any freaking doubt as to which side of the fence Trump is on, it ain't Ukraine's side of the fence. So we've got Viktor Orban saying the only person that can stop NATO assisting Ukraine is Trump. So it's now down to Trump. So that's what other people think. Now what does Trump himself think? Well, he's just been on a podcast with pro-Russian in chief David Sachs, Elon Musk's best mate, who is a total Russian shill. Trump is on a podcast with him and he spouts Russian propaganda. Oh yeah, that's right. If you think Trump is going to be the savior of Ukraine, you are simply wrong. You don't know what you are talking about. You are being completely bamboozled by your love for Trump. And if not for Trump, then for his weird MAGA, super right-wing American conservatism that is a long way from moderate conservatism that is, I think, far more justifiable. Now, former US President Trump said yesterday that the possibility of Ukraine's entry into NATO was really why this full-scale war started. I mean, this is freaking Russian propaganda 101. Oh, why did Russia invade Ukraine? Oh, nothing to do with Russia's just invading because why? Whose fault was it? NATO. NATO's fault. NATO were encroaching. And he blamed President Joe Biden's alleged support for Ukraine's accession as a trigger to the invasion. Of course, Joe Biden wasn't a massive fan and still isn't a massive fan of Ukrainian accession to NATO. He's one of the people actually of Western nations supporting Ukraine who's less supportive of that. He's like, we'll have a bilateral agreement as a stopgap before any kind of consideration of joining NATO, but we don't really want you joining now while you're at war. So this is a real problem. Let's listen to Trump himself.
So for 20 years, I heard that NATO, if Ukraine goes into NATO, it's a real problem for Russia. I've heard that for a long time. And I think that's really why this war started. I'm not sure that this war would have started. Biden,
and goes on to talk about Biden. This war wouldn't have started if it wasn't for NATO. That's why this war started. Man alive, this Egypt needs some serious education, and I really hold back often with Trump. I know you guys realise I'm not a fan of him. He's freaking dangerous. He's so deeply ignorant on international matters, and he is dangerous for the US. He's dangerous for the world, and he loves himself a good old dictator because he wants to be one himself. And if you still love him, then sucks to be you. As Phillips O'Brien says, okay, Trumpites, now your man is blaming the Ukraine war on NATO. In other words, it's not Putin's fault. And he did it while appearing on the podcast of David Sachs, who denies that Russia has committed war crimes. Trump also claimed Ukraine wants to use children to fight, and Russia was right to fear NATO on their border, while seeming to forget that NATO already had a border with Russia in the Baltics. Basically, Trump is speaking Russian propaganda while speaking with a propagandist. It's freaking unacceptable that a man decides to go and give oxygen to David Sachs for a start. Then that platforms David Sachs even further into that ecosystem. And then David Sachs is platforming Russian propaganda himself and through Trump. And who's laughing at this? Who is laughing at this? Vladimir Putin. Putin is sitting back in the Kremlin going, freaking job done. That was money well spent, wasn't it? Thanks, Elon Musk. And I was interesting. I was listening to an analysis of Elon Musk and why he's so down that right in that far right ecosystem where he's now really deeply involved, and why does he hate Biden so much? And it all makes sense now. So a lot of it to do with China and Russia with Elon Musk is he needs lithium and he needs all these rare earth metals and whatnot for his electric cars from China and from Russia. So China and Russia are absolutely vital for Elon Musk to continue making money and be the person he is. Which is why his opinions on China and Russia are not what your and my opinion might be. Okay? He is compromised by his desire to make a shed load of money. Okay, that's one thing. What is it with Biden? Okay, well, Biden's against this kind of idea. But also, Biden is actually quite pro-union. Now, if you know about Elon Musk, Tesla has had huge problems in, is it Norway or Sweden? One of the Nordic states because of unionization there. And it's causing, and also I believe in Germany as well, is it? So there's all sorts of issues. Elon Musk hates union. Biden has been on a picket line with unions and is very supportive of the automotive unions in the US. Musk absolutely does not want strong unions in the US automotive industry. So part of why he hates, it was a really interesting part of the analysis, part of why he hates Biden is, again, follow the freaking money. He wants to be able to take advantage of his workforce to be able to make more money, etc., etc., etc. And we've seen that elsewhere. I mean, we know that's what Musk is like. Anyway, Phillips O'Brien ends with, if I wanted to weaken the US internationally, I could think of no more effective way to do this than to vote Trump back into office. If you love your isolationism, and if you love the US being roundly disrespected back to where it was. I mean, I've shown you the stats before. If you look at the international approval ratings for the US, and for the US president over time, it massively dips after Obama and before Biden. Biden brings it back up internationally. It was Obama, Biden, and then Trump, it goes right down. The international community, by and large, apart from, say, probably Russia and China and North Korean and Iranian views, generally, actually, Iran's a slightly different one, generally didn't like Trump. The international community generally didn't like Trump, and if he gets back in, I just think it would be taking the US back a number of steps. On the other hand, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, someone I don't particularly like, but who is very strong in support for Ukraine, although took a big hit on that during the whole 7-month debacle. But Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal have held a press conference yesterday, and they have introduced a bill to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. And there is indeed the bill. This is really good news. Like, Russia have just gone and done a deal with the freaking North Korea, okay? It can't get more obvious who the bad guys are here. Russia are the bad guys. The fact that you've got Trump spouting Russian propaganda is deeply, deeply worrying. But luckily, I think it would be great if you could formalize Russia as the bad guys. That's what this would do. And if you get bipartisan support for that, which I think you will, because the sensible Republicans will know that Russia are the bad guys here, I think this would be a really useful bill to get passed. I hope this happens. Now, the US and South Korea together must respond to the new Russia-North Korea de facto alliance, says Michael McFaul. So he's previously the ambassador, professor of political science, director of Freeman Spogli Institute and Hoover Senior Fellow, all at Stanford University. He was the US ambassador to Russia from 2012 to 2014, really strong in support of Ukraine. And he says maybe it's time for South Korea to start sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. This is all in response to South Korea actually deciding they may well do that, starting to sanction, as we've seen, North Korean Russian shipping, and really becoming an increasingly important player in this game of 4D chess. Now, German aid to Ukraine says interesting development in the case of the fire at DL Metall last month. So if you remember, there's a fire in DL Metall, but as German aid to Ukraine himself reported at the time, he's very quick to dispel rumours that this was a Russian attempt to set fire to Deal, the defence side of Deal, because this was the automotive metal working place. It had nothing to do with the defence industry per se. And so, kind of rightly, plausibly, in all probability, this was just a fire that had nothing to do with sabotage. However, some new information has come out. So according to Built Information, OK Tabloid, a foreign intelligence service has informed German intelligence services that there are concrete indications of Russian involvement. So if Russian intelligence services wanted to sabotage the production of armaments for Ukraine, they were probably too stupid for a 5-minute Google search. You can quickly read on the internet that no parts of military equipment are manufactured there, and a Deal Defense office on the site moved months beforehand. Another company, Deal Defense, of the Deal Group, manufactures important armaments for Ukraine. This includes, for example, the IRIS-T SLM air defense system and corresponding missiles such as IRIS-T and IRIS-T SL. So Deal Defense would be a bona fide target for such sabotage. DL Metall, as part of the automotive industry under the Deal Group umbrella, isn't such a clever choice of targets. However, it seems to be that this is what happened. The wife of Kazakh opposition activist Aidos Sadyukov, I talked about how he was shot in Kiev just either yesterday or the day before, has said that Ukrainian police have found the perpetrators of the assassination attempt. According to her, the mercenaries were preparing to kill Sadyukov, have Kazakh citizenship themselves. One of them turned out to be an employee of the Regional Department of Internal Affairs of Kazakhstan and a professional shooter. Earlier, she said that she considers Kazim Jomart Tokiev, the president of Kazakhstan, as the orderer of the assassination attempt. So that's getting fairly serious there. And that's pretty much all for today. I just want to come to this. This is from America's number one Patriot, America's First Patriot 127. So this is someone I talk with virtually every day on the threads. I just want to know what you guys think, if you agree with this. So I talked about Jackson Hinkle being like a horrific US, basically a Russian agent who's a US citizen who's now at the moment in Berdyansk, or was in Berdyansk the other day, spreading Russian propaganda and getting away with it and getting platformed, and he's had lives with Elon Musk. And again, we've got David Sachs. We've got this ecosystem that is feeding the particularly American public, but people around the world with a diet of pro-Russian propaganda. And it is incredibly dangerous for our mental health and for our political health to be living on that diet. And we need to do something about it. We need some kind of treatment. And Jackson Hinkle is one of these super spreaders. And we need to cut that out of our like lives in terms of, our political health. And he said, the way you feel about Jackson Hinkle is the way many Americans feel about socialists like yourself and the rest of Europe. The idea that I'm a socialist, I'm not, I'm a centrist. I'm left-wing on moral social issues, but on the economy, I'm pretty much slap bang in the centre. I don't believe in the unaltered free market, the unadulterated free market economy, and I don't believe in communist central planning economic frameworks. Put me in the middle. I believe in a free market capitalism, but you need to be able to regulate sensibly, in order to inject some morality into it. You can't. I've written huge amounts of articles on this. Free market can't arbitrate for morality. Otherwise, we'd still have children working down in mines. I mean, it's pretty bloody obvious, right? And there you go. And yeah, if I would say, you don't want people going around with 0 hours, everyone on 0 hours contract being manipulated by the company or corporation they're working for. But of course, in a perfectly free market economy, you wouldn't even have contracts, no regulation. So you don't even have contracts. You just picked up to work. And it's just, of course, okay, eventually that might develop because you might be competing for the workforce. And so therefore you might provide something better and it'd be so kind of mishmash. We need sensible regulation, and we all believe we need sensible regulation, because we get really annoyed when we're taken advantage of by our employer, right? And then we go and look at our contract and make sure, we want some safeguards. What people who generally argue for unbridled free market capitalism are people who imagine themselves at the top of the hierarchy. Like, I'm the one employing everyone else, so I'm going to be all right. But if you're the worker down there, right, you need some protections. But of course, these people never imagine they're going to be the worker because they've already been privileged enough to be somewhere higher up the hierarchy. So we need to look after each other in society, and that's where sensible government regulation comes in to say, yeah, no, do you know 7-year-olds probably shouldn't be working down a mine? We suggest, wearing gloves when you are operating in this furnace because the last 17 people have had their arms burnt off. So on and so forth, right? That's where I stand. I'm pretty central, as probably most people are. But apparently I'm a massive socialist, and so is the rest of Europe. To be frank, I view what you say on this platform every day as dangerous and directly resulting in Americans dying. In the same way you feel about Ukrainians because of Jackson. Right, okay. Obviously, I don't mean just the Ukraine stuff, but your view on humanity, the world, and geopolitics as well. The difference being I know better than to want to just lock you up and shut you down. I appreciate you being honest and admitting that is how most leftists view basic human rights when it doesn't align with their interpretation of the greater good. Of course, all of these arguments can be used in the exact opposite. Because there's no real substantiation here. So this is just, I could say that about his right-wing views. That I could just replace my name with his. Just for the record, it's not a debate to be had. There is nothing that can or should be done to Jackson in the same way nothing can or should be done to the Hamas apologists all across American campuses when they aren't breaking the law. I just wonder though, and there is a genuine discussion to be had around this about people who are agents of Russia. So does he say, because spies are using freedom of speech, right? Does he think spies and literal traitors of his country who are saying things and listening and just taking that information and giving it back, freely speaking that information back, recording it maybe, I'm free to record this, right? Or just I will take that information back to Russia or China. Is that cool? Do we allow spies? Because like this kind of unnuanced approach is like anyone can say whatever they like, anyone can kind of do whatever they like, there's no regulation, and yeah, we should just let this just go on, and we shouldn't even try to shut down Russian propaganda. We shouldn't try to at the moment, like Elon Musk's Twitter doesn't just not shut it down, it amplifies Russian propaganda. Ukraine news is coded at the same level of misinformation. So Ukraine news is de-amplified. It is disadvantaged on this free speech absolutist platform because Elon Musk hates being he hates Ukraine, it seems, and loves Russia, right? And so he's adapted the coding to reflect that. And Starlink wasn't able to be used and still isn't able to be used around Crimea because XYZ. So, yeah, it's just, it seems to be a really, a really simplistic approach to the ability to do and say what we like just ad infinitum. There has to be some, it gets to the freedom of speech debate again, obviously. But when you're talking about state actors, either unwitting or witting, like those who can be manipulated to be functionally the same as a state actor, and I would argue someone like David Sachs is like that. I don't know if he receives any kickback for what he does, but if he doesn't, he is being manipulated by Russia. Now, he might not be therefore a paid agent, like an actual, physical agent of Russia, a Russian agent. But he's functionally the same. Do we just allow those people? Like, what do we do about that? Sit back and go, well, freedom of speech, let's give it up. Oh, someone's just said bomb on an airplane. Oh, everyone's running around. Oh, the airplane's falling out the sky now because everyone's running around the plane going mental. Or do we say, you can't shout bomb on a plane, you can't shout fire in a theatre, and you can't stand up in class amongst the rest of your 13-year-old kids in your class and swear at your teacher with invective and racial abuse? Like, actually, we need to regulate against that. You can't do that. There's a rule that you can't do that. But freedom of speech, yeah. I wouldn't go and swear at Jill next door in her face just because freedom of speech. Like, with rights come responsibilities, and we need to be responsible for what we say and held accountable for that. Otherwise, it's just the world becomes chaotic and insane. Anyway. So now, if only the left could figure out the same approach to Trump instead of constantly shooting themselves in the foot, dude. If you wanna give Trump all the love and respect you appear to want to, even though you say you don't like Trump very often, but then you spend the rest of the time trying to appease everything Trump does and says, and or trying to excuse everything he does and says, and advocate for him. Like, I'm singularly obsessed with Ukraine at the moment, of course. It's going to colour how I approach most things. Trump is insanely bad for Ukraine. And if you don't see that, then I think you've got a bit of a problem there that probably needs addressing. As I've said many times before, you can advocate for Trump in many other sectors and say he's great. I would vehemently disagree with that. I think he's a despicable human being, and that will colour all the ways he thinks politically, because politics is just a subset of morality, and so it's going to be a reflection of your moral disposition. And I think he's a narcissist and he's out for himself. And if you think he's up for making America better for Americans, all Americans, you're sadly mistaken. He's up for making America better for him and the people who he associates with, and he's already advocated for making further tax cuts for the rich. Do you think he's really bothered about getting insulin prices down for those who need insulin, or because it's economically, it's politically expedient for him to do so, or useful for him to do so? Like, pick the kind of, and even if you don't like Biden, what are the policies that Biden is advocating for at the moment, which in UK terms are pretty centrist policies? So is he trying to make the US a better place? Or is Trump trying to make the US a better place? Like, who's more caring of those people in the country? When you look at the infrastructure bills and the inflation bill, trying to get the economy back on its feet and think about the future. I just think, you look at Trump's tenure and he had the tax cuts for the rich. Well, brilliant, well done, and then jamming people into the Supreme Court so that they restrict people's bodily autonomy. It's like, brilliant. Okay, well done. Well, that's not the kind of world I would like to live in, where the rich get richer and the poor get screwed over. Like, let's have a little bit of rebalancing there, and I think Biden is trying to do that. So you might not like Biden, but let's look at the policies and look at what he's done when he's been able to do things in the US, and you will get a better sense of don't listen to Fox News, who are just hugely disinformative at the moment. To get a better, have a healthier diet in terms of where you get your information on who Trump is and who Biden is, and just look at their track records. Anyway, yeah, it makes me a little bit angry. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Speak soon.